Friends, tonight I want us to sit with a question that feels heavy but necessary, a question that doesn't just touch nations, but reaches into the hearts of mothers, fathers, children, soldiers, every innocent soul who has been forced to live with the thunder of war. That question is this: can a meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska, of all places, be the turning point that ends the war in Ukraine? Now, you and I both know when leaders sit down across the table, it is never just about the handshake, never just about the cameras flashing, never just about the words they exchange in those private rooms. It is about power. It is about pride. It is about the weight of history pressing down on two men who both believe they are larger than life itself. And when you put two men like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin together, you are not just looking at a meeting, you are looking at a storm. Think about where they are meeting: Alaska, not Moscow, not Washington, not Geneva, not Brussels. But Alaska, a land that whispers of old tensions, a land that carries the weight of history, a land that was once sold by Russia to the United States. Isn't it something that the ground beneath them will itself be a reminder of the strange dance between these two nations? Alaska becomes not just a place on the map, but a symbol, a stage, a reminder of unfinished business between empires. So the question the world is asking is this: can such a meeting bring peace to Ukraine? Can these two men, who have both shaken the world with their own storms, find common ground for a country that has been broken and blood dry by violence? Let me take you into the soul of what this means. Every war is not just fought on battlefields. It is fought in kitchens, in classrooms, in hospital corridors where doctors work without power, where children cry because they cannot sleep through the sound of rockets overhead. And every moment leaders hesitate, every time they choose ego over empathy, the human cost piles higher. So when we speak of Trump and Putin and this Alaska meet, we are not just speaking of politics. We are speaking of whether millions of human beings can finally breathe again. Donald Trump comes into this meeting carrying the weight of his own battles. A man who thrives on the art of the deal, who believes he can bend history with his words, who sees himself as the ultimate negotiator. But negotiation is not just about what you gain, it's about what you're willing to give up. And the question remains, what will Trump be willing to sacrifice, and at what cost to the world? On the other side of that table sits Vladimir Putin, a man who has staked his entire legacy on Ukraine, who has wrapped himself in the cloak of empire, who believes history will remember him as the one who restored Russia's power. For Putin, every word spoken, every gesture made is not just about diplomacy, it's about survival, it's about pride, it's about refusing to appear weak before his people or the watching eyes of the world. Now put those two egos together in Alaska, and what you have is fire meeting ice. Trump wants victory. Putin wants validation. The world wants peace. But peace is never born out of ego. It is born out of sacrifice, out of truth, out of the willingness to put humanity before pride. But let me tell you what I know about men like this. They are not driven by silence, by compassion, by humility. They are driven by the applause, by the headlines, by the sense that history bends only because they willed it so. So if peace is to come out of Alaska, will not be because Trump and Putin suddenly found compassion in their hearts. It will be because both of them see an advantage in it. And sometimes, my friends, even selfish motives can create a window for the world to heal. We must ask ourselves, what does Ukraine need right now? What does the world demand? Ukraine needs the bombs to stop. Ukraine needs sovereignty, dignity, the right to decide its own future. The world needs stability. Farmers in Africa need the grain to flow again. Families in Europe need the energy crisis to end. Soldiers on both sides need to go home. Mothers need to know their sons will not be buried in mass graves. Somewhere in the middle of all that, two men in Alaska will sit and decide how much of that suffering can be lifted or prolonged. You see, war is not just about borders, not just about land. War is about identity, about dignity, about being seen and recognized. And Ukraine has fought with everything it has to say to the world: we will not disappear. So if Trump and Putin truly want to end this war, we must recognize that peace cannot be written without Ukraine's voice at the center. Any deal that silences Ukraine will not be peace. It will be surrender. History tells us that a peace born out of silence is never truly peace. It is only the seed of the next war. But what of Trump's motives? What of his hunger to be the one who brings peace where others have failed? Can we deny that he will try to use this meeting as a stage to show the world that he and only he can bend the arc of history? Can we deny that for him, Ukraine is not just a battlefield, it is an opportunity to rise, to reclaim a spotlight he believes belongs to him, and yet in that ambition, perhaps there is a chance. Because sometimes even ego can serve a greater good. If his hunger for glory pushes him to push for peace, then perhaps the world can gain something from it. But do not be mistaken. Peace will not be handed out like a gift at this meeting. Peace will be fought for in the silences, in the concessions, in the compromises neither man wants to make. It will be fought for in the recognition that no war ever truly ends until the wounds of those who suffered have been acknowledged. And here is where I want us to pause. Because while the world watches Trump and Putin, while the cameras wait for that photograph in Alaska, we must not forget the people of Ukraine, whose lives are not a stage, whose pain is not a headline. They are the ones who must live with the outcome of that meeting. And so when we ask, will this Alaska meet end the Ukraine war? We are really asking, will these two men have the courage to see beyond themselves? Will they have the vision to write peace not just as a deal, but as a promise to humanity? And yet, I must tell you, as much as the world hopes, there is a deeper truth we cannot ignore. A meeting like this between Trump and Putin is not just about Ukraine, it is about the soul of international order itself. For generations, we have lived under a fragile agreement, an unspoken covenant that while nations may clash, while interests may collide, there are certain red lines, certain boundaries that must never be crossed. And when Russia rolled its tanks across Ukraine, when missiles fell upon cities where children once played, covenant was shattered. So now Alaska is not just a backdrop for peace. It is a test of whether the world will choose to rebuild that covenant or whether we will live in an age where might makes right, where the powerful take what they want and the weak are left with nothing but rubble. That is what is at stake, not just the end of a war, but the shape of our future. And if I know anything about history, I know this peace cannot be built on silence. Peace cannot be built on shadows. It must be spoken into existence with courage. It must be forged with honesty, and it must be defended not just by armies, but by the will of people who refuse to accept violence as the language of our time. But let us return to Alaska. Imagine the room. Two men sitting across a long table, the world waiting for a sign. One leaning back, calculating, smiling that smile that says he knows more than he lets on. The other leaning forward, hungry to prove himself, ready to strike a bargain if it gives him the victory he craves. And behind them, generals, advisors, whispering aides, men and women who know that in the blink of an eye, the words spoken in that room could save lives' or condemn them. Now, what will they speak of? They will speak of land. They will speak of sanctions. They will speak of guarantees and promises, but beneath every word will be an unspoken truth. Both of them want to walk out of that room as the man who won. Trump wants to say to America, look what I did. I brought peace where no one else could. Putin wants to say to Russia, look what I achieved. I stood against the world and I did not bend. So what happens when two men both want to win? Only one table sits between them. What happens when peace becomes not about justice, not about truth, but about whose ego will be fed first? That, my friends, is the danger of Alaska. And yet here is the paradox. Sometimes history moves forward not because men act out of love, because their selfishness collides in such a way that compromise becomes unavoidable. Sometimes peace is not born of compassion, but of exhaustion. Maybe, just maybe, this war has dragged on long enough, cost enough lives, rattled enough economies, that both men now see an opportunity, not to heal, but to win. And in their pursuit of victory, perhaps the people of Ukraine might finally find a crack of light. But I want to pause here, because this is not just about Trump, not just about Putin. This is about us, all of us, watching, waiting, hoping. We are not bystanders in history. Every war is written not just by generals and presidents, but by the people who refuse to let suffering be forgotten. Every voice that demands peace, every mother who refuses to accept her child's death as just a statistic, every citizen who raises their hand and says this cannot go on becomes part of the chorus that pushes leaders to act. So when we think about Alaska, we must not think of it as a closed room where only two men hold the keys. No, it is a mirror of the world's hunger for peace. It is a stage where humanity's longing for justice meets the hard walls of power. If those walls are to crack, it will not just be because Trump or Putin decided so. It will be because the weight of human suffering became too great to ignore. Let me ask you this. Can two men who thrive on dominance, who thrive on control, truly write a peace that is just? Can they, in their hunger for validation, create something that will last beyond the cameras, beyond the headlines, beyond their own political survival? That, my friends, is the question of our time, because peace is not a performance. Peace is not a headline. Peace is the silence of bombs, the return of refugees, the rebuilding of schools, the healing of wounds that cannot be seen. Peace is not signed on paper. It is lived in the daily lives of people who finally get to wake up without fear. And unless Trump and Putin can understand that, unless they can see beyond their own names etched in the annals of history, Alaska will become just another stage, another show, another missed chance for humanity. But let me hold on to hope, because even in the darkest nights, history has surprised us. Even when it seemed impossible, peace has found its way through the cracks. The Berlin Wall fell. The Cold War thawed. Nations once torn apart by hatred found ways to stand together. Maybe, just maybe, if enough hearts demand it, if enough voices cry out for it, Alaska can become not just a meeting, but a miracle. We cannot predict what will happen in that room. But we can prepare our hearts to demand that what comes out of it honors the lives already lost, honors the future yet to be written. We can say to Trump, we can say to Putin, the world is watching, the world is waiting, and history will not forgive you if you choose pride over peace. And here's the truth I know every war ends. No war lasts forever. The question is never if it will end, but how. Will it end with dignity, with compassion, recognition of the pain inflicted? Or will it end in silence, in bitterness, in a fragile deal that leaves wounds festering? Alaska holds that question in its icy hands, and the world is trembling to see the answer. Let us lean a little deeper into what this Alaska meeting truly represents, because, my friends, symbolism matters. Alaska is a land of extremes. The cold is harsh, the mountains are unforgiving, and the land itself feels like it belongs more to the earth than to man. And isn't that fitting, that two men who see themselves as forces of nature? Donald Trump with his storms of rhetoric, Vladimir Putin with his icy resolve should meet in a place where survival itself depends on strength, on resilience, on the willingness to endure. But symbolism cuts both ways. Alaska, a land once belonging to Russia, sold to America for $7 million in the 19th century, stands as a reminder of shifting power. It is as though history is whispering in the ears of these men, empires rise and empires fall. What you think you own today may not be yours tomorrow. And in that whisper is a lesson neither man may want to hear. Because when men believe they can bend history to their will, they forget that history has a way of humbling even the mightiest. Take you inside Putin's mind for a moment. For him, Ukraine is not just about territory. It is about legacy. It is about making sure his name is remembered not as a caretaker, but as a conqueror. He has framed this war as destiny, as history's calling, as the rightful return of lands he believes were stolen. To him, Alaska itself may feel like a cruel irony. That land, once Russian now, serves as the backdrop where he must sit across from a man who represents the very power that took it away. That tension will sit in the room with them, even if no word is spoken about it. And then there is Trump, a man who has always believed that he is the exception to the rules of history. Where others see failure, he sees opportunity. Where others see danger, he sees spotlight. He does not shrink from chaos, he feeds on it. And in Alaska, he will believe he can do what others could not, that he can emerge as the man who stopped a war. He can show the world that while presidents before him gave speeches, he delivered results. His hunger for that title, that legacy, we be burning in every word he speaks. But let me tell you something, my friends. Ego may sit at the table, but humanity hovers over it. Every soldier still lying in trenches, every family displaced, every child who no longer remembers what silence feels like, they are in that room too. Not in body, in spirit. Because war does not disappear just because men meet in luxury hotels. War follows. Pain follows. And the measure of this Alaska meeting will not be in what these men gain, in what suffering they are willing to end. So ask yourself, what would it take for Putin to end this war? What would it take for Trump to convince him? The truth is, for Putin, peace cannot look like defeat. He cannot walk back to Moscow empty-handed because power in his world is not measured in compassion. It is measured in dominance. He must leave with something he can call victory, some piece of land, some recognition, some guarantee that his gamble was not in vain. And for Trump, that is the challenge. Because to give Putin victory risks betraying Ukraine, risks undermining democracy, risks rewriting the very rules of sovereignty. To give him nothing risks prolonging the war, risks losing the chance to claim the mantle of peacemaker. That is the knife's edge on which Alaska balances. And what of Ukraine? Let us not forget them. Ukraine is not just a chess piece to be moved across a board. Ukraine is a nation of people who have borne the unimaginable. They have seen their cities leveled, their culture threatened, their independence tested in ways no nation should endure. And here is the bitter truth: while Trump and Putin meet in Alaska, Ukraine may not even have a seat at that table. Imagine that your fate decided not by your own voice, by men who see your suffering as a bargaining chip. That is the danger of great power politics. It silences the very people whose lives hang in the balance. And yet there is also this: wars have ended before in rooms where the voices of the suffering were not heard. The Treaty of Westphalia, the Armistice of World War I, the summits of the Cold War, all were written not with compassion, but with calculation. And though they did not heal every wound, they did stop the bleeding. Sometimes stopping the bleeding is the first mercy history can offer. But here's the question I want you to hold: is stopping the bleeding enough? Or do we dare demand more? Do we dare demand not just an end to bombs, but a recognition of Ukraine's dignity, its right to exist, its right to decide its own destiny? Because if Alaska brings only silence but no justice, then this war will not be over. It will only be paused. And one day the guns will roar again. Now, picture this: Trump leans in, his voice booming, telling Putin that the world is tired, that America is ready to make a deal, that history is waiting for them both to rise to the occasion. Putin, calm, calculating, replies that Russia has sacrificed too much to leave with nothing. And between those words lies a gulf as wide as the frozen wilderness outside their window. How do you bridge that gulf? With maps, with promises, with compromises that will echo through history. But in every line drawn, in every handshake made, lives are being decided. And my friends, that is why this meeting matters. Because even if we doubt their motives, even if we question their hearts, even if we see through the performance and the posturing, The fact remains the decisions made in Alaska could determine whether bombs fall tomorrow or whether silence returns. And for that reason alone, we cannot look away. We must remember this peace is not an accident. Peace is not luck. Peace is a choice. And the choice these men face in Alaska is not just about Ukraine. It is about whether they will let history remember them as destroyers or as builders. And though their egos may fight for dominance, though their motives may be clouded by selfishness, the possibility still remains that out of this collision, peace might stumble into existence. And isn't that what hope is? Not the guarantee that everything will be right, but the belief that even in the darkest places, light can still break through. Alaska may be cold, but hope is not. And if this meeting carries even the smallest chance of ending suffering, then hope demands we cling to it. But I must remind you, my friends, that peace is never just the absence of war. Peace is the presence of justice. It is the return of dignity to those who were stripped of it. It is the rebuilding of homes, the reopening of schools, the ladder of children who no longer wake in the night to the sound of bombs. So when we place our hope on a table in Alaska, let us not confuse silence for peace. Silence without justice is only a pause in violence, and that is the test before Trump and Putin. Because for Ukraine, justice means sovereignty. It means being allowed to live as a nation unbroken, unbent, unshaken by the ambitions of its neighbors. For Russia, or at least for Putin, justice has been twisted into the language of restoration, restoring what he believes belongs to Russia. These two visions of justice collide like storms over a frozen sea. And somewhere between them, Trump will try to claim the role of mediator, peacemaker, savior. But I want you to see what lies beneath that ambition. Because Trump is not coming to Alaska for Ukraine. He is not coming for the widows or the orphans. He is coming for himself. He is coming to carve his name into history's stone. And in that hunger, there is danger, but also possibility. For sometimes when men chase legacy, they stumble upon something larger than themselves. Sometimes ego opens a door that compassion alone cannot. Still, we must ask, what will that door look like? If Putin insists on territory, if Trump offers concessions, what message does that send to the world? That wars can be won by force. That invasion is rewarded. That sovereignty is negotiable. These are the shadows that linger over Alaska. Because while two men may see victory, the world may see a precedent that endangers us all. Yet, my spirit tells me this: the war in Ukraine cannot last forever. It cannot. No war does. Every empire that thought itself invincible has fallen. Every battle that seemed eternal has ended. The question is not if this war will end, but how many lives will be lost before it does. And that is why we cannot dismiss this meeting. Because even if it is imperfect, even if it is tainted by ego, even if it does not deliver all that justice demands, if it saves lives, it matters. But let us not forget the invisible guests at that table. The families of Mariupol who watched their city crumble to ashes. The defenders of Kharkiv who stood their ground against impossible odds. The refugees scattered across Europe carrying the weight of memories they can never return to. They are in that room too. And they cry out not for politics, not for performance, but for peace. A peace that lets them come home. A peace that lets them rebuild. A peace that says your suffering was not forgotten. And my friends, this is where the world must hold Trump and Putin accountable. Because no matter what deal is struck in Alaska, it cannot erase the truth, it cannot erase the graves, it cannot erase the crimes committed in darkness. If peace comes without accountability, if peace comes without recognition of the suffering inflicted, then peace will be fragile, brittle, doomed to break under the weight of its own silence. Think often of how history remembers moments like this. Yalta, Geneva, Reykjavik. Each summit carried with it the possibility of a new order, a reshaping of the world. Some brought peace, some brought only delay. All were remembered because they asked leaders to rise above themselves. Alaska is such a moment. It is a chance for two men who thrive on chaos to give the world calm. A chance for men who feed on power to give the world mercy. Will they take it, or will they let it slip away? Here is what I know peace requires: courage. More courage than war. Because war asks you to destroy. Peace asks you to build. War feeds on anger, but peace demands humility. And humility is the hardest gift for men like Trump and Putin to give. But if they can find even a flicker of it, if they can bend even slightly toward humanity, Alaska could be remembered not for ice, but for fire, the fire of hope reborn. And so we come to the heart of the question, will this Alaska meeting end the Ukraine war? My friends, the honest answer is we do not know. No one does. But here is what we can say: Alaska will test the boundaries of ego, the weight of history, and the strength of human will. Will reveal whether leaders who have built their lives on dominance can discover the courage to choose peace. But I also believe this peace will not come from Trump or Putin alone. Peace will come because the world demands it, because people refuse to accept endless suffering, because mothers and fathers will not stop crying out for their children's future, because nations will not stop pressing for stability, because humanity will not stop believing that even in the darkest winters, spring is possible. Alaska may be the stage, but the actors are not only two men, the actors are all of us, and the audience is history itself. And what history will record depends not just on what happens in that room, but on what we as a people, as a world, are willing to demand. If they choose war, then we must continue to raise our voices. If they choose peace, we must hold them accountable to make it real. And if they choose silence, then we must refuse to let silence bury the cries of the suffering. Because peace is not a gift handed down, it is a right demanded by the people who need it most. So yes, Alaska could end the Ukraine war, or it could prolong it, it could heal, or it could wound. It could be remembered as a miracle or as another missed chance. But whatever happens, one truth remains: humanity is stronger than war. And as long as people dream of peace, as long as they believe in justice, as long as they refuse to bow to despair, then peace will always be possible. Let us hold that truth tonight. Let us hold it in our hearts. Let us whisper it into our prayers. Let us speak it into the wind. War does not have the final word. War does not own tomorrow. Peace does. And no matter what happens in Alaska, no matter what is signed or unsaid, that truth will carry us forward. So I say to you, do not lose hope. Do not turn away. Do not let cynicism steal your belief in what is possible, because one day, whether in Alaska or elsewhere, the guns will fall silent. And when they do, it will be because people, not just politicians, chose peace. And when that day comes, may we remember that peace was never theirs to give. It was always ours to demand.